Editing. Welcome to the Real Humans Great Souls podcast. And I am yours truly, Professor Johanna Sophia of Johanna's Raw Foods and the Rawsome Life Global Online University, and so many other things that I also endeavor in. So, today's podcast, Real Humans Great Souls, is titled Flu Symptoms as Cleanse. I've been trying to shorten that title. It was much longer when I started out with this topic because I just am coming out of flu symptoms. What do I mean, flu symptoms as cleanse? Can dis-ease, dis-ease be interpreted as something other than an infliction, something that befalls us from some evil outside forces? May they be toxins or germs or pathogens of some kind. What else can we possibly say about dis-ease? How else can we possibly interpret this phenomenon? Now, I came down with flu symptoms just a few days ago after a particularly energetic and pushing my boundaries hike up and down steep mountains and feeling really like I didn't want to move. And, I get a little nose drip and there's the occasional cough. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go again. My annual little flu symptoms, my annual head cold, whatever you want to call it. I need to take a break. How can I say that just like that? I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not saying I got it from so-and-so because such and such. And I was at the store and that person was sneezing or that person was coughing or that person was blowing. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying something quite different. I'm saying, oh, looks like I overdid it again. Looks like I didn't take good enough care of my body's needs. Looks like I could have done better and fended off whatever toxic environments or emotional situations or stresses were burdening my system. How do I come to this different interpretation, you may ask? And maybe, this is quite normal for you. For most people, it seems to me in these days especially, dis-ease is always an outside onslaught, right? Now, I think to a certain extent, I thought dis-ease just had to do with your constitution, how you were born with certain weaknesses, and that's what you would always get. And I think there is some truth to that, actually. There is some truth to the fact that some of us are more vulnerable for this or for that. I've talked about that in other podcasts and masterminds, that we are vulnerable depending on our genetic makeup, right? On what we get genetically, and then what we get during pregnancy, and then what we get in our early time, what we get from our parents, our very early environment, from what we get our early foods and or lack thereof. And I can say that as a child, I was always considered a little sickly, Now, I've sometimes mentioned that I was born with a little hole in my heart, and so that was an issue, and, running around with blue lips, hence always my lipstick. So, because blue lips meant you have a heart problem, and I didn't want to look like I had a heart problem. Yeah, there was a girl on our street who had a very severe heart problem, whose lips were literally almost like dark purple gray. And yeah, I, of course, felt for her, but also I was like, no, I'm not that bad. She also walked very slowly, and her spine was bent. So I wanted to not be that. Nevertheless, if you will, I was sickly in that I was sick a lot with what we would generally call flu symptoms, and added on then by ear infections or tonsillitis or laryngitis or sinusitis, or all of the above, in sort of this cycle of, start off with a sore throat, then go to sneezing, and then go to coughing, then go to whatever else, ears or head or something, or bronchitis, and then work it all out. Now, it took me a long time to learn that some of those vulnerabilities were poorly guarded, if you will, because I did not know that certain foods and certain environments impacted on that vulnerability and made me have more inflammatory issues, diseases. So yeah, I learned much later that I was highly sensitive to cow's milk products, right? To, yeah, particularly cheeses. And of course, later I learned all humans are not really thriving on those products, but cultures override those ideas or those understandings, those maybe even natural observations of nature, or natural desires to consume, right? Because we develop a particular culture in which something becomes special and something becomes a sign of wealth or something. In the olden days, to make a pound of cheese takes a lot of milk, and not everybody could afford to have those luxurious products. And when we could have more of them, we all thought that's what we must have, right? And that's the luxury product. Same is true for all animal products, really. So I was used to coming down with the flu, and of course, it was called at the time, oh, you caught a cold, right? Meaning you got cold outside, you weren't dressed warm enough, and we didn't understand the connection between getting cold and, of course, our immune system not being able to do all these things at the same time, fending off the cold, keeping the body flooded with good blood, and at the same time keeping our everything else in balance. Now, I've already had a long day. I hope that I'm not triggering another this is another fall back into my symptoms. So this is a green smoothie. It got really thick because I've been having it sit in the fridge. and it is made out of just fruits and greens, and it will hopefully normally I use glasses and have a more elegant look at this podcast, right? But today I'm coming right in from clients that I was sitting with, and so I did not have time. But I've thought much about this topic and also how to address it carefully so as not to offend any kind of guides or lines of guides or any kind of possible factors that will shorten this availability of this video. So I'm going to tread very carefully on this topic, but let us look at what our body does when we give it a break. When we give it a break, when we rest, when we lounge in the sun or by the ocean side or swim in the waters or get an extra hour or 2 or 3 of sleep, when we just allow ourselves to take in culture or yes, go to listen to music, especially live, is incredibly invigorating, or see or hear other people speak, then we feed our mind and soul and emotional makeup like with nutrients, and the body can then do the work it needs to do to clean up. And it's not like the cleanup only can happen once in a while. The cleanup has to happen all the time. Because as I so often said, our body is replicating all the time. Cell tissue is replicating all the time, which means that old cell tissue must be discarded, must be cleansed, so that there's room for the new tissue to grow. And of course, the tissue has to be fed properly so that cell tissue can replicate and produce proper DNA and know where it needs to go. So, what is it then when we have flu symptoms like I just described? Is it maybe a sign that we didn't give the body enough nutrients to do proper cell reproduction, enough rest to have the time to discard? Because discarding doesn't just mean sitting on the toilet or exhaling, right? Which are all discarding processes. It also means the cell tissue inside the body has to be pulled together and put into the channels of the intestines. All of that is a discarding process, right? So that the cell tissue, the dead old cell tissue, can then be excreted. And the same is also true for our exhale. So we inhale new oxygen, tons and tons of course, not tons, but trillions of bacteria and entities in the air that we inhale, and it has to be fresh air, or at least from time to time it has to be refreshed. And then we exhale that which we don't need anymore. We exhale more of the CO2, and we exhale everything that the body needs to get rid of via the avenue of breathing. Now, there are, of course, other avenues of inhaling and exhaling, or ingesting and exgesting or excreting via the skin, via our sweat glands, via our um, urinary tract, via, yeah, what else can we think about? That's it pretty much, right? Also, skin shedding. We need to always shed the old skin so that new skin can build all the time. Now, there are lots of ways in which we can disrupt this process, and humanity being an inventive creature, we've invented all these lotions and oils and things we can put on our skin so that that part is disrupted. We have invented all these artificial smells so that our breathing channels are disrupted or chemically interfered with. And of course, we have invented all these foods that when we ingest them actually disrupt the self-healing and the replication process of the cell tissue. So what then can we realize when those flu symptoms start happening? Some people will get feeling headaches. Some people will get muscle aches. I remembered after that hike, I remembered how I experienced my first real, it was actually the only one, I suppose, in my life, real muscle fever. I was in Los Angeles. I was living in Los Angeles, and I was teaching languages, French and German and English, depending on, who the clientele was. And I was teaching. Oh, that was too much. This is an incredible essential oil mix. Whew, that will make me breathe fresh and hopefully stop the triggering of any further coughs. So I was in Los Angeles teaching languages while also writing my first novel that then was supposed to become a screenplay, one of those stories that never happened, but I was involved with lots of different characters. Wait a second. Yeah, I had like a synopsis for my first, then later became my first screenplay that I was talking with all kinds of people about and hoping to work together with, from Denzel Washington. This is now 35 years ago, so it's a long time ago. He was young then. And I actually met with him and with Herbie Hancock and with a bunch of other people in the scene that I wanted to collaborate with. So I was teaching him French to a guy who was a personal fitness trainer. And he said, okay, can we make a deal? I'll train you and you'll teach me. So, good deal, done. It was my first time ever really sort of fitness training in a sort of professional manner, right? Beforehand, I had gone in and out of gyms occasionally, and done my few little few little things. But this young man, and I'm sorry, I forgot his name, was really enthusiastic about making me super fit, right? And of course, I was very ambitious. And I would train and train. And bingo, I completely sprained or something like that my right shoulder, right up here. I'll never forget it. Now, my right shoulder is one of those bizarre things I was born with, is missing a couple of muscles up here. So it's very bony, and other muscles from the sides here have to make up for it. And one that's very poorly developed in the back there, that's where the muscle was overdone. And suddenly I was feverish and all my muscles were like burning, and it was weird, the weirdest thing. And he said, "Oh my God, you got yourself muscle fever." And lo and behold, I had to like stop and it needed to, I needed to give these muscles a break so that they would calm down and reconfigure themselves, hopefully. And I never started back up because by the time my long resting period, I think it needed to be a couple of months, I was already moving out of Los Angeles to New York. But I will always remember that just the overstressing of the muscle tissue could actually lead to fever and these flu symptoms and this muscle ache and pain. Well, yeah, actually, this shoulder was painful for a long time, but but all my other muscle tissues also were aching. So it became a systemic issue that I then had to calm down and let appease the muscles before I could pick back up any kind of upper body training or serious training. So why I was thinking of that, because I felt a little bit like that, although in a much milder way after this hike. And combining that muscle stressing with a mental stressing, what am I going to do? How am I going to get my big plan into action? How am I going to get my big goal of putting this online university into the world? How am I going to manifest that? How am I going to make that happen? Make the money and actually, I wasn't even thinking about the money. Just, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make this happen? So the muscle stress together with the mental emotional stress then brings on the body telling me stop. And you need to lie down. You need to sleep for a couple of days. You need to just not think and not stress and not worry. And it's interesting, even though, of course, we always have to pay our bills and figure out a way to get to the next step, to the next level, to the next task at hand. When your body stops you, suddenly everything else becomes, well, almost irrelevant. That's also why, when loved ones of ours get really sick with something severe, it's like we stop everything to go to their aid and to help them, because then it becomes, I don't know, it's like suddenly nothing else matters and you just need to okay, lay back. So there's another explanation as to why we get sick. When we overdo it, when we overstress it. Yeah, I can't quite stop it altogether. You'll be fine. I'm not coughing into your face. She says as she's arguing that it's not germs, but okay, I'll get back to that in a minute. So, in my view, there's only two things that make us sick. Here we go again, right? One is poisoning, and the other is lack of care, overly stressed. And of course, the two often come together. On the one hand, we have poisoning can have all kinds of sources. Even I had this argument with Dr. Gary Null. Even botulism, which is from a bacterium that can develop in preserves that is not completely in a vacuum, but also doesn't have enough air to manifest fungi and rot properly. And then when I read it up, it's that the bacterium produces an actual poison. So again, it's not an infection with the bacterium, but a poisoning that we get when we have botulism, which can be quite dangerous. But I don't have time to go into that. Dr. Gary Null is an incredible researcher and journalist and innovator, and he's the one who put plants as carrying the full amino acid chain, meaning protein, on the map, literally in scientific understanding. But for some reason, he is also a germaphobe. And while he is my dear friend and I admire him in so many ways, that's where we argue. So back to either poisoning or overstressing. So there's poisoning, and of course, there's lots of ways we can fall ill from poisoning. Poisoning ranging from natural poisoning, meaning literally eating a poisonous mushroom, a poisonous fruit or food, or a poisonous fish, or having to, all the way to poisonous events that happen in nature, such as volcanic ash can be poisonous. And so can, of course, a slew of chemicals that are not natural. So poisoning can occur from nature or from man-made products. Of course, in recent decades, let's put it that way, most poisoning is of a chemical kind that is man-made, and that goes from the chemicals produced and that are put into our products to the chemicals that are put into the atmosphere, that are put into our waters, and sometimes unknowingly, most of the time knowingly, they can render us quite ill. But there's also another whole slew of, we call it environmental poisoning, that comes with electromagnetic fields. Now, I have a book here in my bookshelf called something with the rainbow. Darn, I'm so bad sometimes with names and titles. The Invisible Rainbow, in which is described that changes in the magnetic field around the planet or in certain areas around cities, etc., will impact our, of course, magnetic energy field and our cell tissue's magnetic energy, and therefore, again, interrupt that self-cleansing, replicating process and render us ill. In fact, the author argues that inflammatory diseases such as flus or respiratory diseases in particular are caused by changes in the electromagnetic field. So he describes that certain epidemics or pandemics happen when a new electromagnetic technology is introduced to the planet, when electricity is first introduced, even when telegrams are first introduced, when then the phone is introduced, then radio waves are introduced, TV is introduced, then internet is introduced, and all those electromagnetic new fields impact our cell tissue. And interestingly, it seems like we adjust to a certain extent. We can fend off, or the human body adjusts to new ways of being and behaving in new environments, right? Just like when we expose ourselves to sunlight, our skin will produce new melanin because it needs to have a new kind of barrier or process to absorb and process sunlight, which of course we all need. It's not that sunlight is bad. It's just that we adjust to the amount of melanin we need in a given environment. And I'm saying too many ands in this podcast. So those are the two ways I think that dis-ease is created, right? One from poisoning, and the second from lack of care, lack of nutrients, lack of rest, lack of good air, lack of good water. So all of those, and lack of good emotional nurturing. We often forget that when we just think about the biology, right? The emotional state that we're in also very, very much impacts our well-being. So we talk about these things. Yeah, we can get sick from the stress is going to make me sick, and the worry is going to make me sick, and the this and the other. But that is actually now biologically provable. And it's so that when we have so much stress, may it be emotional or mental or physical, our body literally produces too much of a particular substance, such as adrenaline and others, the names of which I do not recall, but I'll recognize them when I see them. Then those elements that we sometimes need, we need adrenaline, right? When we want to make an extra effort and get to a particular goal or run a race or whichever it is. But if we are in that state all the time and producing too much of those particular chemicals in our body, then it destroys the balance and it destroys the replication process and the healthy equilibrium between all elements that we need and that we call life. You know that I like to call life a symphony of tiny entities that, when playing together, make a beautiful concert, but when in disharmony, make a cacophony that is destructive. If you asked me about the field of music, I would say I love a lot of different kinds of music, except for for metal. Um, yeah, I think there is, of course, a cacophony that is destructive to our physical body. Of course, we have those proofs of the water molecules that form beautiful crystals when there is harmonic, beautiful music, and that form these crippled non-crystals, really clumps, when exposed to heavy metal. So what can we then do to render this the symptoms of disease, to understand better what we should actually do, how we should react to symptoms of disease? Should we shove them under the rug, drink another coffee, drink another whatever those cold and flu drinks used to be? I don't want to name company names, so you know what I mean. Slow, dry up the cough or the nose drip or whatever it is, and therefore, yeah, in one way or another, shove the symptoms under the rug and continue as if nothing happened. Now, I think when we do that, we have not healed or helped the cause, namely the off balance situation in our bodies. So we have not helped the natural reproductive process to get back into balance, but we have pushed it further out of balance, but we're going to live with it anyway. And unfortunately, many of what we call medicines today will do just that. Treat the symptoms, but not the cause. Instead, and I was like happily thinking about this as I was laying in bed these last 2 days for most of the day. Instead, why not call these symptoms a blessing? Why not call them a little wake-up call? Thank you. I really need to listen to my body now. I really need to lay back and allow it to do its thing. And of course, we want to help it do its thing. We want to help it with deep breathing. I do the Wim Hof exercises a lot with good fruits and greens. And I have found that it is particularly helpful to just go completely fruits and veggies, fresh only, for a few days. Like I've just been doing sweet smoothie and savory smoothie, sweet smoothie and savory smoothie, like what I do in my smoothie cleanses, which, you're welcome to ask me about. And I've been enjoying the fact that my body actually wants to sleep when that happens. So I slept like 14 hours the first night and then was watching things and thinking about things, but not really with intention to research and learn and write my book and just watching things and letting the day go by with relatively little intention. I think that's another thing. When we're highly driven people, and I know many of you are, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this. When you're very driven people, you want to make the most out of your life, right? Then it is incredibly rare that you allow yourself to just say, okay, I'm not doing anything. I'm looking out the window and I found myself, and of course I got calls and I had a couple of client calls that I did take. Oh, I'm looking at the trees outside my window and the birds and the clouds, and I'm perfectly happy doing so. And yes, I have to blow my nose and I have to cough and I have to sweat and then get up and change my clothes and wash off and put on different clothes and go back into bed and lay back and watch the trees and the birds and the clouds and allow my mind to wander and rest as well. So therewith, I decided to be very clear on that from now on, every time my body signals to me, you need to stop. By way of having a nose drip, by way of having muscle pain. I actually don't have muscle pain, and I didn't get muscle pain from the hike either, but it turned out into the nose drip and the cough. And you can hear it a little bit in my voice still, right? And of course, I'm still coughing a little. So every time that happens, I'm going to allow myself, I'm going to say, thank you. I'm not even going to say, now I have an excuse to stay in bed, but thank you for giving me the symptoms, giving me the indication that I need to take better care of myself. And maybe it is also a good thing to just do this every so many times a year, ever so often. Oh God, my brain. So that we actually could put it into our schedule. Every couple of months, I need 2 days in bed, or I need 2 days by the beach if it happens to be summer. Of course, right now it's going into winter, so it's getting cold. So, but then bed is a perfect place. And it's better than the couch because it's fresh linens, hopefully all cotton. And you don't have to wear clothes. You just have I have down covers. I love down covers. Of course, there are other natural covers, natural fiber covers as well. It helps a lot when all your fibers are natural for that healing period in particular. And therefore, honor your body's ability to fix itself. And fixing, just one of the doctors, psychologists, was saying fixing is not really the right word. Allowing the body to maximize itself, allowing the brain to maximize itself. I thought that was a beautiful change of terminology. Instead of saying, something is broken, you need to fix it, allowing your body to maximize its capacity of what it's capable of. Beautiful way of turning that brokenness into an opportunity to make yourself even better. Yeah, with creative people, inventive people, or business people, we also have this pressure that our brain constantly produces ideas and maybe various avenues that could go this way or that way or the other way. And we're not quite necessarily clear as to we're just going this way. And even if we think we know we're just going this way, our brain, because it's so creative and inventive, always comes up with, oh, what about this? And what about that? And what about the other? And and that too creates brain stress. We're always trying to make more of everything. And that brain stress too leads to exhaustion of our mind, body, emotional functioning, right? Because with every new idea, there are emotions attached to it, or expected outcomes, or worries, or blockages, or obstacles foreseen, right? With every idea, there's all this additional scenario that can play in our brain all the time. Now, if we allow ourselves to go into this mode of it's all good, it's all okay, we can sleep, and when we wake up, we continue, we can just allow for it. It's interesting. When we allow for it, it actually calms down. When we step out of the I must understand and do and fix and finish, it's interesting that what sometimes keeps us awake at night because we think, oh, I just always think too much. When we say, I just want to let my mind think all at once, I'm just not going to judge it. I'm just not going to feel anything about it. I'm just letting it go, letting it be. Then amazingly, strangely, the brain calms down. It just, okay, I'm alive. I'm breathing. Even though my nose may be stuffed, I'm here. Let's allow for rest and sleep and being, kind of a little bit like vegetating for a day or two, right? So, and then in that vegetative, weird, slowed down space, interesting things happen. Of course, I'm not saying that I wasn't doing anything these last 2.5 days. It was only 2.5 days. So it seems like a long, that's the other beautiful thing. It seems like a long period of time when we allow ourselves to just lay in bed and look out the window. I'm telling you, suddenly you think, oh my God, I've been lying here for days and days and nothing has changed. Time slows down. Our brain slows down. And in that slowed down space, good new thoughts and ideas come to the surface without the stress. Now, you might want to know what I came up with in this time. Then I have to tell you that I decided, okay, I'm going to make money. I'm going to make money. I've made money before. I'm going to put scruples aside. I'm going to make money. So interesting that that was my resolve, because yes, I have a couple of ways and avenues that I can make money relatively quickly. I just have to decide and do it. And then, of course, other things become more important, and I stop again and indulge and spend my money on my ideal works, such as the university I was telling you about. So in my case, this was a very simple resolution. The simple plan was just that I'm going to make money. And it's interesting that it became kind of peaceful in my mind. And then I got a call that I'm invited to an important function. And, weird things happen that align with those decisions that come out of some very relaxed situation. So the benefit of having or being in the state of dis-ease, when you allow that to play out, can be really rewarding, because you're taking yourself back, you're slowing yourself down, and you're allowing for something to come up that you may not even have expected. You may have expected some complicated new idea, and it's something very simple. And let's see how effective it will be. So that's not to disregard, I just want to wrap this up, not to disregard the fact that we should, of course, help our body in that recuperation process. The fact that it took me just 2 days has a lot to do with the fact that I have my essential oils, that I have my smoothies, that I have extremely good water, that I allowed myself to sleep as much as I possibly could, and that I did the deep breathing exercises, that I did not force myself to exercise, which for me is important in these periods of time. I've tried different ways of, saying I can do it anyway. And it just prolongs the healing process, or the process of your body getting back into its balance, right? But these are all the things, deep breathing, good nourishment, if possible, only raw plant based, good water, as much rest as you can get, and laughter, not to forget. Laughter is medicine. So while I didn't do as much as I wanted to, I thought, okay, let me watch some comedies. But I got into other things that I wanted to listen to. But yeah, but I had enough laughter here and there, so that this joyfulness, this like, life is beautiful, life is fun, life is so ironic, it's so good, right? And here I am after 2 days of bed rest. Actually, to be honest, it wasn't entirely. Yesterday I went to the bank because I had to finagle some monies. And what was the day before? There was something else I needed to do as well. Oh, I had to get up for a Zoom call. Was I outside on that day? Just, yeah. And oh, there's one more thing. Earthing is also very, very helpful and important. So in this array of things, from nutrients to breathing to rest and good water and laughter, is also earthing. Earthing means barefoot on the soil or on rocks or on cement, works too, where you get direct connection to the ground, and you can discharge all the electrical vibes that we have with these things and these things here and these things in the air, etc. So discharging by going barefoot on the ground, on grass or rock or cement, is also very important. So all of those items then help for the body to get back into balance, and you're getting your rest and your 2 days off, or 3 or 4 or 5, which is all good. You need to give it to yourself so that you get back into that calm, joyful mood of being without stress, except for the little drive that, keeps you going. So is this then true also for other diseases? And my time does not really permit to go much into it. Of course, bigger diseases, other diseases such as, what we call the chronic diseases, what we call the incurable diseases, what we call the autoimmune diseases, etc., all can be interpreted also as symptoms that we did not treat our body like it needs to be treated, and that can be a little different for every individual, but still that can be said. And much more than a couple of days in bed will have to change in a lifestyle to turn those around. But more about that in other podcasts. And I want to encourage you to see your flu symptoms or your head cold symptoms or your little muscle fevers as an invitation to give your body a special treat and your mind and your brain a special treat, and take a couple of days of rest and do all this good stuff. And suddenly you can be grateful for such occurrences. Make sense? Let me know what you think. And of course, please hit the subscribe button and join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m., except for the last week of each month, which is when I should be taking a break. Most of the time I'm not, but I'm actually not doing my regular calls. So the last week of the month is relaxed time, I call it, for my clients, and I'm not really doing what I recommend. So I should do better in that. Okay. That's it for today. We've just hit the 2 hour mark, no, the 1 hour mark. And I'm looking forward to your comments and to next week and the next podcast. Ciao for today.